Every year, millions of innocent children leave this world before they can even begin to understand what life is, before they can properly say their own names, before they finish playing with their toys, while they still smile when they hear their mother's voice. They die because of illness, hunger, war, or beneath homes that collapse overnight. And what remains behind is silence. Tiny shoes, empty beds, photographs hanging on walls, no longer looked at by anyone. When we face this reality, the heaviest question in human history rises again before us. If there is a God who is just, merciful, and all-powerful, why is so much suffering allowed to happen to innocent children? This question is not new, but today we have more information than ever before. According to the World Health Organization, around 15,000 children die every single day before reaching the age of 5. 15,000. It sounds like a cold statistic, but each one was a name, a voice, a laugh, a fear, a mother, a father, and most of these deaths were preventable. If there had been clean water, if a vaccine had been available, if a simple medicine could have been reached. A baby born in Africa enters life with a far higher risk of death than one born in a developed country. From the very moment of birth, it is as if their fate has already been written heavier. When humans face suffering on this scale, they desperately try to give it meaning. Because meaningless suffering is more than the human mind can carry. That is why believers have searched for explanations for centuries. The most common explanation is free will. God gave humans free will and evil exists because of it. But we have to stop here. Whose free will causes a baby to be born with leukemia? Which wrong choice leads a 3-year-old child to die in their mother's arms during an earthquake? A being who has not even learned the word why yet. What moral mistake are they paying for? This world is a test, they say. But what kind of test is a 3-month-old baby taking? How can the suffering and death of a child who has committed no sin and made no conscious choice be reconciled with justice? If this is a test for the parents, then what is the child? A lesson? A tool? Someone else's exam paper? Is mercy taught through the suffering of a child? Some say children suffer because of their parents' sins, or that earthquake, that tsunami, that plague is punishment for what a nation has done. But wait. Don't the holy books themselves say that no one can bear the sins of another? So how does an innocent baby end up paying for the mistakes of their father? How do children with no choices and no guilt suffer for the actions of an entire society? If this truly is a test, what exactly are these babies being tested on? Failing to be born in the right place? Choosing the wrong parents? What kind of justice system is this, where the innocent are punished and the guilty often live comfortably? History is full of these questions. In the Middle Ages, millions of children died during plague outbreaks. Mothers buried their children in their arms. What had those children done to deserve this? Where was God? More recently, in Rwanda, in Syria, in Yemen, children crushed under bombs, reduced to skin and bones by hunger, suffocated by chemical gas. Where was divine intervention for them? What grand plan required bodies this small to be broken? At this point, a familiar phrase is often heard. God's wisdom cannot be questioned. For some, this is a refuge, but it is also a command to be silent. It means accept the pain and do not ask. Yet the first thing a human does in pain is ask. When a mother loses her child, she falls to her knees and asks, why? Perhaps this question is the purest form of being human. Another answer is offered, it will be compensated in the afterlife. But this idea does not truly bring peace. Can the suffering of a child in this world really be balanced by a promised reward later? If a human being said to another, you will suffer now, but I will make it up to you later, wouldn't we call that cruel? Why do we apply a different moral standard when the subject is God? This problem has been discussed in philosophy for centuries. Long ago, a philosopher asked this question. If God wants to prevent evil but cannot, then he is not all-powerful. If he can prevent it but does not want to, then he is not merciful. If he both can and wants to, then why does evil exist? This question is still here. And perhaps what truly frightens us is where this question might lead. Maybe the truth we must face is far more unsettling. Nature does not have to be just. Viruses do not recognize innocence. Earthquakes do not distinguish between children and adults. Cancer cells do not know mercy. The universe is largely indifferent. This thought is terrifying, but it is also honest. And sometimes honesty is heavier than comfort. When we look at sacred texts, the picture becomes even more complicated. They tell stories of great disasters, destroyed cities, mass deaths. Modern believers often interpret these stories symbolically. But every symbolic interpretation creates new questions. If these stories are allegorical, why are they presented as moral guidance? And if they are taken literally, how can we live with a vision of God surrounded by the deaths of innocent children? Humanity created stories to survive this unbearable reality. Religion became the strongest of these stories, because the idea that suffering has no meaning is even more frightening than suffering itself. But as knowledge grows, the gap between these stories and reality widens, and every innocent child who dies silently widens that gap a little more. Maybe people still believe because they are afraid of death, afraid of uncertainty, afraid of the possibility that there is no meaning at all. Religion feels like an answer to these fears, but the question remains, does something being comforting mean it must be true? History shows us something clearly. Children did not stop dying because people prayed more. They stopped dying because vaccines were developed, clean water was provided, and diseases were treated. These were not miracles from the sky. They were human efforts, lives saved by human hands. So perhaps the real question is this: where do we place responsibility? On an invisible power or on ourselves? Because if there is no hand reaching down to protect children, then that hand must be ours. A child dying from hunger is not destiny. It is not an unavoidable tragedy. It is an unprevented one. Imagine a mother keeping her child's tiny shoes. A father unable to close the door to their child's room for months. People crying silently while everyone else sleeps. What does it change to tell them this was God's plan? Does it ease the pain, or does it simply end the conversation? Innocent children are still dying. This fact does not change. But perhaps hope is not found in waiting for a miracle someday. Perhaps it is found in what we do to ensure that no child has to die like this again. In the hands that hold a child, in the doctors who heal, in societies that end hunger, in decisions that stop bombs from falling. Perhaps the reason we ask this question is not to judge God. Perhaps it forces us to look at ourselves. What have we done? What have we failed to do? What suffering have we ignored? Which deaths have we learned to accept as normal? This video does not give you a final answer, because maybe there is no final answer, but perhaps what truly matters is this: never stopping asking the question. Because this question is not testing God, it is testing us, our conscience, and what kind of humanity we choose to be.